Marcus Hill had two lives, one with his pregnant wife, Alicia, and another with his fiancée, Tanya, who had no idea he was already married. By the time Tanya walked down the aisle in her white dress, Marcus thought he had outsmarted them both. But when Alicia appeared at the chapel doors, 8 months pregnant and holding proof of his betrayal, the truth crashed the wedding, and his carefully built double life came undone in front of everyone. Marcus Hill was the kind of man people trusted on sight. He dressed sharp, spoke with confidence, and always had a smile that made people feel comfortable. In Charlotte, North Carolina, he was known for closing big real estate deals and hosting open houses that felt more like social events. Clients liked him, colleagues respected him, and strangers often mistook him for someone famous. Everything about him said success. He lived in a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood with his wife, Alicia. They had been married for 4 years, and from the outside, their relationship looked strong. Alicia was warm, kind, and always supportive of Marcus. She had worked as a preschool teacher before deciding to stay home during her pregnancy. Now, 8 months along with twin boys, she spent her days organizing the nursery, attending doctor appointments, and preparing for their arrival with lists, baby books, and soft blankets. They had shared their pregnancy news with friends and family during a dinner party 3 months prior. Marcus had been glowing with pride that night, raising a toast to the next chapter and promising to be the kind of father his kids could look up to. Alicia believed him, and so did everyone else. There were no visible cracks in the image, not then. The house was filled with signs of new life. 2 cribs waited side by side in the corner room upstairs, a closet full of tiny clothes, shelves lined with stuffed animals, and a chalkboard in the kitchen counting down the weeks. Alicia kept a pregnancy journal beside the bed, writing notes to her unborn sons about their father. How hard he worked, how excited he was, how lucky they all were. But while she made plans and bought diapers in bulk, Marcus was drifting further from home. He had started coming back late more often. He said he had clients who could only meet after hours, and new development projects that demanded his weekends. Alicia didn't question him. She assumed the extra hours were for their future. He told her the market was unpredictable, and that now was the time to push harder. It made sense. She wanted to believe him. What Alicia didn't know was that Marcus's calendar was filled with more than just showings and closings. His text messages, carefully deleted, had nothing to do with business. His secret wasn't just another woman, it was a second life. And it hadn't started recently. Tanya Mills entered Marcus's world nearly 2 years earlier. She was vibrant, ambitious, and worked as a wedding planner in the city. They had met at a luxury condo showing, and Marcus was immediately drawn to her. It began casually, a flirtatious exchange, drinks after work, a few dinners under the excuse of networking. But soon, it became a full-blown affair. Unlike Alicia, Tanya didn't talk about baby names or birth plans. She spoke of destination weddings and her dreams of opening her own event space. To her, Marcus was single and successful. He let her believe it. He told Tanya that his marriage had ended quietly, without drama, and that he had no kids. He painted himself as a man focused on moving forward. She had no reason to doubt him. When he introduced her to a few mutual friends, none of them corrected the lie. In Marcus's world, deception was an art. He was too careful to get caught. Or so he thought. The deeper he went, the more dangerous the lies became. He began using a second phone to text Tanya. He kept her contact saved under a man's name. He changed his routines. Even the car he drove to see her was different. He told Alicia it was a work rental. Every detail was calculated. By the time Alicia reached her third trimester, Marcus had already proposed to Tanya. He gave her a ring he claimed was custom-made. The proposal was small, private, and completely hidden from his real life. Tanya said yes without hesitation, thrilled at the idea of marrying the man she thought was her future. She began planning immediately, choosing a venue outside the city and sending out discreet invites. Marcus agreed to the date, March 15th, and promised everything would be official by then. He said the paperwork from his supposed divorce was being finalized. In reality, he was still married, still sleeping in the same bed as his wife, still kissing her belly and talking to his unborn sons at night. At work, no one suspected anything. He kept his stories straight. He kept his distance from anyone who might connect the dots. And when he slipped up, he was quick with a cover story. For a man used to selling dreams to strangers, lying to two women he knew well came naturally. He convinced himself it was all under control. But as the wedding day crept closer and Alicia's due date loomed, the walls around his secret life began to crack. He didn't know that Alicia had started noticing inconsistencies, the receipts that didn't match his stories, the unexplained charges on their shared account, the long silences when he was away. At first, she dismissed her doubts, but as they grew louder, she began to quietly gather pieces of the puzzle. Still, Marcus had no idea what was coming. He believed he could make it all work. He believed the wedding would go off without a hitch. He believed he could keep living both lives if only for a little longer. He was wrong. Tanya Mills lived a life filled with beauty, precision, and planning. As a well-known wedding planner in Charlotte, she built her reputation by creating dream ceremonies for her clients. Her Instagram feed was a soft blur of flowers, lace, and smiling couples. Behind the scenes, Tanya was organized, driven, and deeply romantic. She believed in love. Real, lasting love. And she believed she had finally found it in Marcus Hill. From the moment they met at an upscale condo showing, Tanya felt something click. Marcus was confident, successful, and spoke with purpose. He wasn't just another client. He was someone who understood her vision, someone who listened. They exchanged numbers under the pretense of discussing event venues, but within a week, they were having dinner. Marcus claimed he was recently divorced. He said things had ended amicably and that he was ready to move forward. Tanya didn't press for details. She respected his boundaries. She liked that he wasn't overly emotional about the past. It made him seem stable. As their relationship developed, Marcus made time for her in ways that felt intentional. He brought her lunch at the studio, sent flowers after long days, and even helped coordinate some of her events. He showed up just enough to seem committed, but not so often that his lies unraveled. He told her he lived alone, and that work kept him traveling. Tanya, independent and focused on her business, didn't question it. She had her own schedule to keep, and his absences didn't bother her, at least not at first. Their relationship moved quickly. Marcus talked about the future with certainty. He hinted at marriage after only a few months and began making comments about houses, kids, and where they'd live someday. Tanya, swept up in the romance, believed she had finally found a man who understood commitment. She had dated men before who feared settling down, who avoided hard conversations. But Marcus wasn't like them. He looked her in the eyes when he spoke. He made her feel chosen. In reality, Marcus had become an expert in compartmentalizing. He had divided his life into segments, each carefully walled off from the other. In one world, he was the devoted husband preparing to become a father. In another, he was the charming fiancé, promising forever to a woman who had no idea what he was hiding. It wasn't just deceit, it was calculation. To keep Tanya from becoming suspicious, Marcus limited how much she saw of his daily life. He never let her visit his home, claiming it was under renovation. He met her in neutral places, always careful about where they went and who might see them. He told her his ex had taken most of his personal belongings and that he was in the process of rebuilding. Tanya found it sad but believable. She was touched by his resilience. When Marcus proposed, it wasn't dramatic. It was intimate, just the two of them on the rooftop of a downtown hotel. He handed her a velvet box and said she made him feel alive again. Tanya cried when she said yes. She immediately began planning their wedding, excited to design her own perfect day after years of organizing other people's love stories. She chose a date in early spring, March 15th, and picked a rustic chapel just outside the city. She kept the guest list small and the ceremony elegant. Meanwhile, Alicia, 8 months pregnant, was experiencing an entirely different reality. She was exhausted, uncomfortable, and increasingly anxious about Marcus's frequent absences. He continued to assure her everything was fine, blaming work stress and unpredictable clients. She wanted to believe him, but doubt had begun to set in, and with every missed phone call or vague excuse, it grew harder to ignore. Marcus, juggling both worlds, started to make small mistakes. A receipt left in his jacket pocket, a change in his cologne, moments where he seemed distracted or emotionally distant. Alicia noticed, but she didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, she began to observe more closely. She started quietly tracking his schedule, paying attention to inconsistencies. She even reached out to one of his co-workers under the pretense of planning a surprise for him, hoping to confirm where he was spending his time. The answers she received didn't match what Marcus had been telling her. Back in Tanya's world, everything was moving forward. She ordered a custom dress and arranged for a close friend to officiate the wedding. Marcus approved every detail with a smile, even though he knew he was building a house of cards. He told himself he would figure it out later, maybe claim the divorce papers were delayed, or stage some kind of dramatic break from Alicia right before the wedding. But the clock was ticking, and the walls were closing in. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, Tanya noticed Marcus becoming more tense. He missed a couple of vendor meetings and seemed distracted during conversations. She chalked it up to nerves, not realizing the full weight of what he was hiding. She had no idea there was another woman, his actual wife, just miles away, days from giving birth, piecing together a truth that would shatter everything. Marcus had underestimated them both. He thought his charm would keep the truth at bay. He thought control and secrecy were enough. But the life he built on lies was about to unravel in a way that no one, not even he, could stop. The morning of March 15th began like any other spring day in North Carolina, bright, calm, and full of promise. Birds chirped softly as the sun rose, and everything seemed perfectly in place. Tanya woke up early, her heart fluttering with excitement. Today was her wedding day. After months of planning, dress fittings, and cake tastings, it was finally happening. She had checked every detail twice, from the flowers to the guest seating, making sure everything would be flawless. She smiled as she slipped into her white satin robe and looked at her reflection, envisioning how the day would unfold. The small chapel just outside the city had been decorated beautifully. Soft white drapes hung from the ceiling, and cream-colored. Roses lined the aisles. A pianist rehearsed the wedding march while guests began to arrive, chatting quietly and admiring the quaint venue. Tanya's closest friends and family took their seats, completely unaware that the groom they were about to watch walk down the aisle was living a lie. Marcus arrived in a tailored navy suit, looking confident and composed. On the outside, nothing betrayed the chaos bubbling beneath the surface. He shook hands, smiled for photos, and thanked guests for coming. Inside, his stomach was tight. He kept checking the time, glancing at his phone, which he had silenced hours earlier. Every second felt like borrowed time. He knew Alicia had been acting strange lately, quieter, more observant. He had noticed the way she watched him more closely, how her hugs lingered as if trying to catch something slipping away. But he had convinced himself she didn't know. He believed he still had control. Tanya waited in the bridal suite, adjusting her veil and taking deep breaths. She didn't know Marcus had spent the previous night lying to another woman, or that his wedding ring from a still-valid marriage was tucked away in the glove box of his car. She was completely unaware that the woman he claimed was long gone was still very much in his life, and very much pregnant. What Marcus didn't know was that Alicia had not only discovered the affair, she had confirmed the wedding date, time, and location. A mutual acquaintance of theirs had seen a wedding post tagged with Tanya's business name and had messaged Alicia out of curiosity. It took just a few clicks for Alicia to find everything she needed: the pictures, the venue, even the registry. That's when the shock transformed into fury. At 8 months pregnant, Alicia didn't just want answers, she wanted justice. She had spent weeks debating whether to confront Marcus directly or wait. But once she saw that the wedding was still on, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let it happen. She wasn't going to let him lie his way into a second marriage, while pretending to be a loyal husband and expectant father. With the help of a close friend and Marcus's cousin, who had unknowingly introduced Marcus to Tanya years ago, Alicia formed a plan. Back at the chapel, the ceremony was about to begin. Guests had taken their seats. The music shifted to the wedding march. Tanya stood at the chapel entrance, arm in arm with her father, ready to walk down the aisle. Marcus stood at the altar, heart pounding. He knew this moment was supposed to be the beginning of something new, but all he could feel was dread. Just as Tanya took her first step forward, the double doors burst open with a loud bang. The music stopped. Heads turned. A sharp gasp rippled through the room. There, standing in the doorway, was Alicia. She was wearing a long maternity dress, her stomach unmistakably full with the twins she was just weeks away from delivering. Beside her stood Marcus's cousin, holding each of her hands, and 2 small boys, twins belonging to a friend, stood in front of them, clutching toy cars. It was a visual shockwave. In one hand, Alicia held framed sonogram pictures. In the other, she held a copy of her and Marcus's marriage certificate. Her eyes locked onto Marcus, who looked as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He froze, unable to move or speak. Tanya, halfway down the aisle, stopped in her tracks, her veil trembling slightly as her face drained of color. The guests looked back and forth between the bride and the woman in the doorway, unsure of what they were witnessing. Alicia didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any words. She slowly walked down the aisle, stopping, just short of the altar. She held up the documents for everyone to see. Murmurs turned into whispers. Someone began recording on their phone. Tanya, still in disbelief, looked at Marcus, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't. He couldn't. His silence was the final confirmation. Tanya dropped her bouquet and stepped backward. Her father gently pulled her away, shielding her from the growing chaos. Alicia stood still, her breath heavy, her eyes unwavering. Then, just as calmly as she had entered, she turned and walked out of the chapel, never once looking back. Guests began to leave. The officiant stepped aside. The pianist stopped playing. Marcus stood alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies. The wedding was over. So was everything else. The video spread like wildfire. Within hours of the wedding fiasco, clips of Alicia's dramatic entrance were all over social media. First, it showed up on a few local Facebook groups. Then, someone posted a trimmed version on TikTok with the caption, "Pregnant wife crashes." Wedding. The groom was already married. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Millions watched in disbelief as a visibly pregnant Alicia calmly walked down the aisle, sonogram photos in hand, exposing Marcus Hill in front of a stunned crowd. It was the kind of story the internet devoured. Real-life betrayal, heartbreak, and justice, all captured in one unforgettable moment. The response was immediate and unforgiving. People across the country picked sides, but most rallied behind Alicia. She was praised for her strength and composure, with many calling her a hero for women everywhere. Online forums picked apart every detail of the footage, analyzing the reactions of the guests, the look on Tanya's face, and Marcus's stunned silence. Strangers began sending Alicia messages of support, offering everything from legal advice to baby gifts. Overnight, she went from a quiet, expectant mother to a symbol of empowerment. For Marcus, the fallout was swift and brutal. His employer, the real estate agency where he had built a successful career, terminated his contract within 2 days. They cited a violation of professional ethics and the damage to their public image. His social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Former clients began withdrawing listings and canceling appointments. No one wanted to work with the man who had humiliated 2 women in front of the world. The scandal reached the local news, then regional outlets. A few national talk shows even discussed the incident, using it as an example of the growing trend of uncovering hidden lives through social media. One segment featured a marriage counselor who explained the psychological traits of men like Marcus: charming, manipulative, deeply insecure. Another included interviews with betrayed spouses who had lived similar experiences. Marcus became a symbol of deception, his name dragged through headlines and hashtags. Tanya disappeared from public view almost immediately. Humiliated and blindsided, she locked her social media accounts and refused to answer messages from friends or reporters. According to people close to her, she had believed every word Marcus said. The proposal, the wedding plans, the promise of a shared future. All of it had felt real. She hadn't suspected a thing. In private, she was devastated. She moved back in with her parents and began seeing a therapist. It would take months for her to even speak publicly about what had happened. Eventually, Tanya gave a carefully worded interview to a local magazine. She spoke softly and held back tears as she explained how thoroughly she had been misled. She didn't blame Alicia. She expressed sympathy for her and the twins. She said Marcus had destroyed more than just 2 relationships. He had shattered her ability to trust. The article went viral as well, and many viewed it as a raw and honest portrait of a woman who had also been a victim. Alicia, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her life. After filing for divorce, she moved out of the home she and Marcus had shared. With support from friends, family, and the growing online community that now followed her story, she found a new apartment in a nearby neighborhood. Her twins were born just weeks later. 2 healthy, beautiful boys with matching brown eyes. She named them Elijah and Emmanuel, names she had picked long before discovering Marcus's betrayal. Despite everything, she wanted them to know love. From the very beginning, she didn't hide from the public. Instead, she used her newfound platform to speak out. She began a blog documenting her journey as a single mother, offering advice and encouragement to others going through similar heartbreak. She talked about healing, boundaries, and how to spot emotional red flags. Her openness struck a chord, and her blog gained thousands of followers. People appreciated her honesty and resilience. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Marcus tried to salvage what remained of his life, but the damage was too deep. With no job and no public sympathy, he struggled financially and socially. Friends distanced themselves. His reputation was in ruins. Legal trouble soon followed. Alicia's divorce filing included claims of financial misconduct. When she began reviewing their joint finances, she discovered that Marcus had siphoned money from their savings to help pay for his secret engagement. There were unexplained credit card charges, cash withdrawals, and deposits into a hidden account. Once uncovered, the evidence led to a civil lawsuit. Marcus was ordered to repay the funds, which further strained his already crumbling stability. He had gone from a well-dressed success story to a cautionary tale, a man who wanted everything and ended up with nothing. The chapel where the wedding was supposed to take place resumed hosting ceremonies, but staff said they would never forget that day. Some guests never spoke to Marcus again. A few even apologized to Alicia later, saying they wished they had seen the signs. As the dust settled, people continued to follow the story. Not because of the scandal alone, but because of what came after. It was about more than a ruined wedding. It was about betrayal, yes, but also about what happens when someone decides not to be broken by it. Alicia's story was a reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life can be the beginning of your strength. 1 year later, the world had moved on, but the echoes of that day still lingered in quiet corners of the internet. The video of Alicia walking into the chapel remained bookmarked in playlists titled Top 10 Wedding Shockers and Ultimate Karma Moments. But for the people at the center of the scandal, life had taken very different paths. Alicia now lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Atlanta. It wasn't large, but it was hers. A white crib sat near the window surrounded by alphabet wall decals and picture books. Her twin sons, Elijah and Emmanuel, were happy, chubby toddlers who had begun to crawl at lightning speed. They were her joy, her reason for everything. Despite the pain and betrayal, Alicia was no longer broken. She was grounded, focused, and determined. Her blog, Life After Lies, had grown into something much bigger than she had expected. What started as a personal outlet quickly turned into a community. Other women reached out to her with their own stories. Of husbands who led double lives, of secrets discovered too late, of broken trust and the slow, painful road back to peace. Alicia responded to every message she could. She offered encouragement, shared resources, and even held live Q&A sessions where she talked openly about the emotional wreckage she had crawled out of. Brands took notice. A few companies reached out to sponsor her content. Baby products, wellness services, and single mom support groups. She carefully chose which ones to work with, only partnering with organizations she truly believed in. Her blog turned into a podcast. She was invited to speak on panels and podcasts, and slowly, a new kind of life began to form, one built not on secrecy, but on truth. Alicia didn't talk about Marcus unless she had to. When she did, it wasn't with bitterness. It was with clarity. She explained how charm can be a mask, how lies can be wrapped in beautiful words. She didn't make excuses for what he did, but she no longer carried the weight of his betrayal. She had set it down long ago. Marcus, on the other hand, had disappeared from the spotlight, if not entirely from memory. After losing his job, his home, and much of his social circle, he had attempted to restart his career in a different city, under a different name, but his face had been everywhere. The internet doesn't forget easily. Potential employers Googled him. Clients recognized him. No matter how well he tried to rebrand, the story followed. He drifted through a series of short-term jobs and temporary housing. He attempted to contact Alicia several times, once through email, another time through a mutual acquaintance. But she didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Their divorce had finalized 6 months after the chapel incident. The judge granted Alicia full custody of the twins. Marcus was given visitation rights, but he never used them. Whether it was guilt, fear, or shame, he stayed away. Tanya eventually returned to work. After months of silence and recovery, she reopened her wedding planning business, this time with a stricter screening process for clients and vendors. She no longer posted personal details online. Her designs became even more thoughtful, her events even more polished, but there was a guardedness about her now. The sparkle hadn't disappeared. It had just grown more cautious. In a quiet moment during a local interview, she said, "You don't stop believing in love, but you start asking better questions." She and Alicia never spoke directly, but mutual friends said Tanya respected the way Alicia handled the entire situation. There was no feud between them, just shared damage from the same man, stitched together in different ways. The chapel where it all unfolded still hosted weddings. The staff avoided bringing up that day unless asked, though occasionally guests recognized the space from the infamous video. Some even booked the venue just for the thrill of saying they got married where the drama happened. But the space had moved on, like most things eventually do. Still, every now and then, a new viewer stumbled upon the viral clip and reignited the conversation. It never truly went away, because it was more than just a dramatic moment. It was a reflection of something real. How betrayal hides behind smiles. How truth sometimes waits for just the right moment to walk in through a door and change everything. For Alicia, the story wasn't about Marcus anymore. It was about everything that came after. About discovering her own strength. About raising 2 sons in a home where they would always be told the truth. About showing women that endings can also be beginnings. She had loved deeply, been betrayed, publicly, and rebuilt quietly. She no longer counted weeks in a pregnancy journal or waited for someone to come home late. She no longer searched for signs or second-guessed her instincts. She had done all of that. And now she was simply living, honestly, openly, and on her own terms. The worst day of her life had already come and gone. What remained was everything she had built in its place.